Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'll be
Assalamu
interviewing the amazing Mohsen for the Halal Hustle. Assalamu alaikum,
wa
Mohsen.
alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Excited to be here.
We're very excited for this series. Assalamu alaikum, Mohsen.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
All right, let's get into it. Meet Mohsen Zakaib. Mohsen Zakaib is a Brody Scholar, class of 2027, who is currently interested in emergency medicine and critical care. From nuclear engineering to medical school, from youth mentorship to refugee health advocacy, Mohsen Zakaib's journey is anything but ordinary. A proud Pakistani who grew up in Lebanon, Mohsen has woven together his passion for medicine, community service, and Islamic scholarship into a career path rooted in service to others. Inshallah, Tarek is going to be asking the questions.
Now, for the first question, I want to ask you. You were born into a Pakistani family, but grew up in Lebanon. How did that multicultural upbringing shape your identity and influence your values?
To be very honest with you, I think it resulted in a lot of things. One of the reflections that I've had recently is, growing up in Lebanon, I spent 16 years there, so it wasn't just like a couple of years. I was born there, so since birth up to 16 years of age, I was in Lebanon. Every summer we would obviously go back to Pakistan, to the village, and we would stay there for a couple of months. And so kind of being in those places, and then at 16, now immigrating to the United States, it was almost like I didn't feel like, I feel like I belonged everywhere, but also never felt that I belonged anywhere, if that makes sense. So like, I hate the phrase like citizen of the world type of deal, because I don't actually feel a citizen of the world, but because everywhere I go, I feel like there's some commonalities that I can share with people, but at the same time, I can't truly see myself as being one of them, if that makes sense. And that's just something that, I think as we go along in life, as you're going to know your own identity, you go through these phases, and I'm still trying to figure that out. Who am I type of question. But I think that's okay, and I think that's something that I'll probably figure out, as I go along. And I don't have an issue with not belonging necessarily, or feeling like I belong fully to one place, because I think that opens up a lot of other opportunities. For example, one of the advantages of growing up in various different areas is I can connect with those people. I understand where those people are coming from, and I can actually implement that in my life, in my practices, in the people I meet, even in medicine, right? When I meet different people and different individuals with different backgrounds. So I think that's one of the advantages of that.
A lot of people actually relate to what you're saying right now. And even though you've lived and matured more in the United States than in Lebanon, do you still feel more connected with Lebanon than the United States?
I think I feel connected with all of these lands in different ways, right? So I think I've been in the US for now about almost like 11 years now, right? But there's something special about those formative years, as you're growing up, you're making those early memories. I think there's something special, there's something nostalgic about that. So I don't think I could ever say like I relate more, anywhere else than, those few memories when I was growing up. But at the same time, I don't think that one comes over the other. I think they kind of become complementary after a while.
Exactly. Thank you so much for that.
All right, as someone who grew up in Nigeria and moved to the United States about like 4 years ago, so I have a question for you. What challenges did you face growing up between two cultural worlds, and how did you navigate them?
That is a good question. Sometimes I don't know how I navigated it, like at a deep level, at least. I think when you're growing up, you're not actively thinking about, oh, how am I navigating between one environment versus another, right? Like I would come home and I have that environment, right? My parents are speaking Urdu to me, and we're engaging in what we would call like traditional Pakistani values, eating Pakistani food and all that. But then when I would go outside, I would go to school, I go with my friends, I'm in that Lebanese atmosphere, in the Lebanese environment, following their cultures, their nuances, and so speaking Arabic with them. So it was, I think it kind of happened without thinking about it. It almost like I was formed through those experiences by default, without me actually actively trying to see, oh, how do I fit here versus how do I fit here? I think more of that came when I moved to the United States, because now I'm at an age where I'm like, I've had those formations, those early memories from both the Pakistani household and the Lebanese environment. But now moving to the United States at the age of 16, and now this is a completely new environment for me. And I remember I was like moving here, I'm like watching some of those high school movies. I'm like, is that how high school is gonna be here and all that. It wasn't, right. It was just like a normal some people go study, learn. It wasn't like the movies where you got bullying going on or anywhere, people being stuffed in lockers. I don't know, maybe that happened somewhere. It didn't happen to me.
Oh, it does. It does happen.
I'm sure it does, but alhamdulillah, it didn't happen to me. And I made friends. I interacted with people. It was normal. And I started to learn more about the American way, the American customs, American cultures. Obviously, from an Islamic standpoint, I think a lot of those things vibed with what we were taught, and coming up with that. But there are other things that obviously we don't necessarily agree with, but that's okay. We accept and we take what aligns, and we stay away from what doesn't align. And then at this point, I feel like it's got to the point again where now it's just natural, right? Like I don't have to actively think, okay, now I'm going into this environment versus that environment to change myself. Right.
Jazakumullah khairan. Now, looking at your resume, I kind of tell myself that this man know what he wanted to do in life. Nuclear engineering, physics, anthropology, Islamic studies, medical school. What made you go in this diverse path? Did you know what you wanted to do, or?
Dang, the guy, he's asking me like, were you clueless?
Entering into life? You got a very diverse, respectable resume.
I think one of the things that I realized early on was that I was interested in a lot of different things. And obviously, whenever I would talk to people about like career paths and things like that, people would always say, usually, what is the traditional pathway? You choose something, you work one job and you work it till the end of your life, and then you retire, whatever. Like that's the approach. You're good at one thing. And sometimes I feel like society pushes us towards that. You're good at one thing. But I started like, is that the natural way of humans? Are we just like doing one thing, right? Or two things, or even three things? Or are we more multifaceted in that way? I look like back in our Islamic tradition, and I see like polymaths, right? Like Ibn Hazm, who were doing all these different things, right? You look at Ibn Rushd, you look at all these polymaths that were doing a variety of things, right? Every single one of them. And they were excelling in all those things. I resonated with that. I feel like that's more of a natural human thing, where you're interested in a lot of things and you do those things because you like to do those things. I also very much liked those subjects, right? I love the idea of how do we provide energy to the world. I think sometimes we forget, like there was a time where the world lived without energy, like without light, without, and it's funny, I talk to my dad sometimes and he's like, when they were growing up in the village, when they were young, they didn't have light. And that's so alien to me, right? Because I grew up my entire life with light. I mean, in Lebanon, sometimes the light would cut out for a couple hours, but still, like you grow up with technology all around us and light. So I think that was very interesting to me. I was like, how do we make sure we provide energy? But not only that, as from a Muslim perspective, something that's very important to me is sustainability, right? It's how do we make sure that we are not destroying our environment, because that's one of our duties as vicegerents on Earth, right? And so I was like, what is like a sustainable form of energy? How do we make sure that, we can provide that baseline power of energy while also meeting that sustainability aspect? And that's where I was really interested in nuclear engineering. I really enjoyed the program, but I also just like physics, like thinking about those larger questions of life. Where do we come from? I think physics tries to answer at least some of those questions, or at least understanding, I would say more so understanding the way that the world works. And I think that's beautiful. Same thing with anthropology. I love studying humanity. I love studying like how people are and were in the past. And I think that's very important. So yeah, that was kind of like and then medicine. I mean, I can go on and on.
It kind of goes to show as well, it's never too late to start over. And that's what I kind of like about your story. You got a master's in nuclear engineering and you said, I want to pursue medicine. Now you're doing medicine. Yeah. And it just goes to show, if you want to do something, if you put your head down, you'll be able to achieve it.
Absolutely. So, and with that, like the reason really I switched, it wasn't because I didn't like nuclear engineering or any of that. It was more so that, the COVID pandemic hit. I really resonated with helping people in the moment. I see medicine as a service that you can provide at any point, at any time. With nuclear engineering, there's a lot of infrastructure you have to have in place for people or for nations to have that capability. But with medicine, you carry those skills with you, right? And yeah, there are some limitations. You can't like perform brain surgery without, not that I'm interested in performing brain surgery, but like, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, you can carry those skills and you can provide service to humanity at that point, right? It's almost like instant gratification. And that's why it really resonated with medicine.
Exactly. Jazakumullah khairan. Now, how does your diverse educational background influence the way you approach medical problems?
I think one of the things is just going through engineering school, like you identify a problem, you identify the steps to solve that problem, and then you approach and you try to solve that problem. I think medicine is very similar, right?
Yeah.
You go, someone comes to you, a patient, right? They have a whole range of symptoms. It's a mystery. You got to solve that mystery. You identify the cause. You look at the steps. What are the steps needed to, for resolution or even for narrowing down your differential, and then you try to solve the problem. And it's an iterative process. Doesn't mean you're going to solve it the first time or the second time, right? I think that really helped. That engineering mindset really helped. I also think, it helps with the numbers aspect of medicine sometimes too. Anthropology, for example, just studying the way humans are, I think that's very important in medicine because you need to understand where people are coming from, what are their backgrounds, what are their different thought systems. Yeah. Because once you understand that, that's a piece of the puzzle in medicine, right? And once you understand that, you are at a better position to help those people, right? To help your patients. And I think that's very important. And I'm starting to see that in my rotations. I'm still technically now we're halfway through our third year. Yeah. It's our third rotation. Wow, time flies. But I'm starting to see that a lot in medicine. I'll give you a quick example if you let me. It's a very small thing and probably non-consequential to the actual treatment plan or anything like that. But I remember I was on one of my rotations and one of the anesthesiologists, they come in and both the patients, the patient spoke Arabic and their family, they had one family member there and they also spoke Arabic only. And so, what they usually do is they bring in like a translator. In person is preferred, but if not, then they have them already caught and they come in and they have like an online translator that does the translating. And, I wanted to be like, hey, I can help with translating, but also that's not necessarily like preferred, like, because, I might know the language, but I don't know how to say, high spinal, in that language. So, I was observing this interaction and there was one point in the interaction where, the physician, he was mentioning a number. I think he mentioned like 1.5 feet or 2 feet in the context of something. And the translator was like, can you repeat that? And then, the anesthesiologist like said it again, like 1.5, 2 feet. And then the translator was even confused, right? They're like, what do you mean 1.5, 2 feet, like feet itself? And that's when I realized there is a cultural misunderstanding here, right? Because most of the international world uses, centimeters and meters, right? And here we're using feet. And so I think even the translator couldn't understand that. And that's where I stepped in and spoke in Arabic. And I told the translator and the patients like, oh, I think what they mean here is like, it's a unit of measurement, feet, and, try to explain it to them in centimeters or meters. And I think that like just very small thing, but I think those things add up,
Exactly.
Now moving to the Islamic side. So how does your faith guide your decision making as a future physician?
I think faith is everything when it comes to my journey into medicine or journey into anything in life. I think that is a central part of who I am. I think it's a central part of who a lot of Muslims are, right? Everything we do for the sake of Allah, or at least we try to do that, right? And I think that's the same thing with medicine, right? If I'm doing something, I'm doing it for the sake of Allah. We know the famous verse of the Quran, right? Where Allah says, if you save one life, it is as if you have saved humanity. And so I really resonate with that. And what is a better field to do that than medicine, where you're quite literally saving lives, right? And so at least I make sure that I keep renewing my intention that the reason I'm doing this for the sake of Allah. I'm doing this as a service to humanity for the sake of Allah. And so I would say it's very central to me. And just a little bit about, my Islamic background. I did get a Islamic studies degree from Mishkat University, and that really helped me understand a lot of different things when it comes to some so, obviously understanding the religion, but also specific applications of context, right? Like, for example, in medicine right now, we founded the Muslim Medical Student Association here at Brody. And one of the things that we're working on is a Muslim provider aid document, basically a document that we're going to provide to providers of any faith, right? Excuse me, alhamdulillah, to help them understand how to approach Muslim patients from a conversational perspective, but also, and from a cultural perspective, but also in terms of like, what can you expect of Muslim, like when a Muslim walks in and they're approaching them and they're about to talk to them about a certain topic, let's say like abortion or medications, like, can I give this medication? What about diet? You have to have hospital food, but what can you eat, what you can't eat? And so really utilizing that knowledge, as well as connecting with some of my teachers who really, they're the ones who are giving the fatwa or the jurisprudential rulings, and making sure that this project comes to fruition so that we can help our Muslim brothers and sisters who come seeking medical care. So and one of the things I really appreciate about the medical system, there's always an effort to make sure that we are catering to all types of people from all different backgrounds, from all different thought systems. And so I think providers will be very interested in this document to help them connect more to their Muslim patients, and I think it will be beneficial for Muslim patients as well.
Inshallah. Have you ever had to make a tough choice where your Islamic values were like truly tested, even if it was meant harder professionally?
I wouldn't say I was tested necessarily with this, but obviously the question comes of like prayers and Jumu'ah when you're like going through school or going through rotations. But everyone was very understanding, at least at the Brody School of Medicine and the ECU Health Hospital. Like everyone, you tell them, actually most of them already know what you're about to say, and they're like, oh, prayers, yeah, go ahead. And sometimes, like Friday prayers, they'll be like, yeah, you got Friday prayers, right? And I'm like, how the heck do you know? And I'm like, you want to join me? Like, so like they already know all these things. So I don't think it was a challenge. Nobody's ever been like, no, actually, you got to stay here. And at the same time, I'm not like, I'm not standing there and, they're in the middle of something very important to patient care. And I'm like, hey, by the way, I got to step out. I don't do that. Right. And I think that takes, cultural, or not cultural, but like contextual understanding. Like you don't just jump to those things. When someone's busy trying to do something very important, you don't like stop them, like, can I walk out for this? But at the same time, no one has ever given me any trouble so far. I hope that continues, and I would like to hope that's similar, and that's the case for a lot of programs around the country. But yeah.
I would like to add to that question. So what about like if you meet like a female physician and she's like, oh, nice to meet you, my name's Zoe, for example. What would you do in that?
I have a question for why Zoe? Why was that the first name?
Why not Fatima, actually?
Okay, Fatima. Well, Fatima wouldn't try to shake his hand, but
for the hypothetical.
So I think the way I approach this, and again, this is not like I'm not telling people to approach it in this way. There's a range of opinions when it comes to this matter. Some people take the approach that we don't have any handshakes, anything like that, and I respect that and honor that. And I think with the example of Khabib, for example, and when he's doing this in front of everybody on stage, I think that's a very powerful statement, because that is our default. Our default is we do not engage and shake hands or touch the other gender who are not our mahrams, right? And that's out of respect. It's not out of disrespect, right? It's actually out of modesty. It's out of maintaining that respect between genders. In the real context, in like the clinical context, if someone puts out their hand and I'm never going to see them again, like the likelihood is that I'm never going to talk to them again. It's like a one-time interaction. If they put that hand out, I usually shake the hand, and I take the other opinion or the minority opinion that, that the hadith that discusses this issue is not talking about this specific type of contact, right? So I take that opinion. But if it's someone that I'm going to be interacting with over a period of time, it's easy for me to just be like, hey, by the way, just so you know, like I'm Muslim, I don't shake hands, I don't, do a lot of touches and stuff like that. And I've had situations where a very, very old lady, like maybe in her 80s or something, like she's like, thank you. And by the way, they all think you're already a doctor, so they're like, thank you, doctor. When it comes to like 80, 90-year-olds, I'm not I don't see that. There isn't that. Not to go too deep, but there isn't that illah of like, oh, there's some attraction or anything like that. But yeah, that's usually my approach. Is if I'm going to be consistently interacting with them, I will let them know that this is not something we do because of our religious values. If it's a one-time thing, I take the minority opinion, and but if people have other ways to approach it, that's completely
Yeah.
within the religious paradigm.
So now we're gonna go into some of your extracurriculars. So you've worked closely with underserved and refugee populations. What would you say is some important lessons that they've taught you?
Oh, they've taught me so many lessons. I think working with the refugee population is probably one of the best experiences I've had in medical school, as well as in in Greenville in general. So we started this medical or this refugee project. It was really the purpose of the project, called Health Pals, was to increase the healthcare literacy of refugee population in Greenville specifically, and it was mostly Syrian, Colombian, Guatemalan, and then also we've had some other refugee populations come in as well. We've collaborated with Interfaith Refugee Ministry, who's really responsible with connecting the refugees to the area. And they do a lot of great work here. We've collaborated with St. Timothy's Episcopal Church. We've collaborated with the Islamic Association of Eastern North Carolina. So a lot of collaborations were taking place. A lot of good work was happening. But back to the question, what did I learn from them? I don't even know where to start. Like, I learned what it means to go through adversity and still remain hopeful. Because every single one of them have gone through untold horrors. And I don't want to say those horrors because it's not the setting for it, but untold horrors. And they still welcomed you, and they still welcomed me and my partner to their homes. They still gave us tea and biscuits. They came and talked to us and chatted with us. They were always super nice. They were always willing to, and they always look towards the future, and they always have that hope. Like, yeah, we're happy to be here. We're excited to be here. We're happy to come to Greenville and enrich the culture of Greenville. We're happy to start working. We're happy to start having, sending our kids to schools. We're happy to become integrated within this community. And I think that's beautiful, because I don't know if I was in their position, I would be that hopeful. And I think if there's one thing I could talk about, like, what did I learn from them, is that it's hope.
And it's kind of a weird dynamic to think about. The ones that don't have anything, the ones that are at the lowest of the low, they are the ones with the most hope.
Yeah.
And
they complain the least.
They complain the least.
Yeah.
You would think that if you have everything, you would complain less, you would be more hopeful of the future, but it's actually the opposite. And
Yeah.
that's what's beautiful about it. You are closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you're at the complete bottom of the bottom.
Yeah.
And I think you working with refugees, I think that's helped you realize that.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. 100%. 100%.
Now, moving on to the next question. You've led youth programs in multiple communities. What's the biggest challenge in keeping Muslim youth connected to their faith? And very big challenge, especially with the stuff you see out in university and everything. It's hard for them to be connected with their faith. How do you manage? How do you help them connect?
So I've worked with youth programs in Winston-Salem. I've worked with youth in the Triangle area with various organizations, and I've worked with the youth here in Greenville, North Carolina. The youth have very similar problems across these. I mean, we're not geographically too distant, but I would even extrapolate that to the entirety of the US, maybe the entirety of the Western world itself, right? I think they have very similar issues. And one of them is obviously connecting back to religion. And I think one of the challenges is getting people interested to come and learn about Islam, to come and connect back with the deen, right? But there's solutions to this. And I think one of the challenges comes when you are not able to implement some of those solutions, some of those established solutions, because of whether it be, maybe previous generation mentality. And this is not to put them down, they've done amazing work, but when there's a new generation that comes, they have new ways of thinking, they have new ways of what attracts them and what repels them, right? And we can't necessarily apply the same ideas from the past now to the present. And I'll give you an example of Winston-Salem, because I think that was my first experience, and it was a beautiful experience. Everyone was very, very supportive of what we were doing, and the parents would come and attend, and they would bring their kids, but also they would stay at a distance, so because you don't want parents to be in youth program, right? and we had fun. We had that, and I think that's a big thing. Make sure that they have fun. At the end of the day, they're young people. They want to enjoy their lives. They don't want to come and sit for 2 hours, listening to some academic lecture, right? You bring them in, you have fun with them, and then you answer their questions and their real life problems. Because some of their problems, sometimes we lecture about certain things, but their problems are completely different. Their issues are completely different, right? And so that's one thing that I learned is when younger people are able to lead the youth programs, they're able to bring that fresh energy, but also connect better to their issues and to their problems, right? And actually address some of those issues and problems. And alhamdulillah, I've had similar experiences in the Triangle community, similar experiences in the Greenville community. Alhamdulillah, there's efforts there. Obviously, we need to make those efforts better. But I think that's amazing. Another point I just want to point out, or another thing I want to point out here, I think we need to especially focus and give a stage and put even more effort into Muslim, young women who are in our communities, because a lot of times they are either overlooked, or a lot of times people don't understand the problems that they're going through, and this can lead to resentment. This can lead to things, and we see like, okay, why do some Muslim women don't adhere to, like, for example, like the Islamic way of thinking? Why are they more attracted to man-made notions like feminism and other things like that? Is because we don't answer their issues, we don't answer their problems. And so if we don't do that, then they're going to go out and find other ways of thought or philosophies that are going to answer those issues, right? And it's really our fault. Like, we should be catering to them, right? We should be answering their questions, answering their issues. And that's something that I want to emphasize, especially in smaller communities, especially in areas where perhaps that former generation logic is still prevalent. And again, it's not a hit on them. It's just, tomorrow when, inshallah, one day we have kids, I'm not the right person at that point to lead those youth programs. You guys aren't going to be the right people to lead those youth programs. Why? Because they will have their own issues. And so you need to find those champions in your community who are young people who can go in and connect with the youth, help them with their issues, help them with their problems. And I promise you, that will result in them building an Islamic identity. Then later they'll go on, some of them will be scholars, some of them won't pursue the academic path, but at least they'll come to prayers, they'll keep connected to their Islamic identity, and they'll pass that on to their future generations.
Brother, are you calling yourself a champion? Sorry, I couldn't overlook that. I'm sorry.
I mean, I didn't want to say it out loud.
Okay, I wouldn't say champion.
And just so you know, there are a lot of amazing people in our community that are doing this work. I barely do anything at this point, right? You got people like yourselves, for example, like, you guys are in college, but you come back for the high school and middle school, youth programs, and you guys are helping them out. They're going to look up to you guys. They're going to connect with you guys more than they're going to connect with me. And you know their problems more than I do. I barely know their lingo anymore, but you guys, I hope, at least know some of it, right? And what's interesting is a lot of these issues are not necessarily discussed at the youth program. They're discussed outside of the youth program. But the youth program is needed so that they can build that connection. And then obviously our dear spiritual leader of this community, the Imam, right? I mean, he is providing that direction for us. So may Allah empower them.
I want to go on to a more personal and fun type of question. Between hiking, scuba diving, sports, which hobby gives you the most clarity? Which one do you enjoy the most?
I think I really like water-based activities.
Like swimming and all of that.
Yeah, swimming, kayaking, scuba diving, just being on a boat. Maybe what do you call that when you swing off that, like the side and you jump into the water?
I don't know, those ropes, like some lakes,
Tarzan
or something?
No. Some lakes have those ropes. You know what I'm saying? No,
that's not a
bungee
jump.
No. It's like
it's like a monkey bar type of thing.
No. It's literally just a rope and a lot.
Oh, and then you go down, you jump into the water. Yes, I've seen that. I don't know what it's called, but
I like those types of things. I think they give me a lot of. They give me I enjoy that stuff. But so for example, hiking I enjoy too, but I would say water sports more so. But I enjoy hiking. I enjoy being in nature. I I enjoy playing sports. I don't enjoy watching sports at all.
Wow, that's a hot take.
At all.
Very
I
hot
do
take.
not enjoy watching sports. I'd rather be doing the sport than watching it. But yeah, I enjoy it.
What's one book or movie that completely changed your outlook on life, if you have one?
He doesn't watch movies because he's too busy.
Oh no, I love movies.
Oh, wow.
I love certain movies.
Has there been one that changed your life
Changed
or-
my life. I don't
or outlook on life?
I don't think any movie has changed my life, and I also don't think any book has like changed my
Or
life.
change your mentality.
Maybe with the obviously with the exception of the Quran, like I don't think any book has changed my life. I think books and movies have added to my life. They've given me certain insights, which is still very important, and that's why I enjoy watching certain movies or reading certain books. I think one of the books that I really enjoyed, and again, this is like, I'm not trying to mention any Islamic books right now because those are like on a completely different level. I don't even want to, get there because then there's like hundreds of books or that are amazing, if not thousands of books. I think there was one that my wife gave me a while ago or a long time ago. It was called The Journey of Ibn Fattuma. It's written by, I think he's an Egyptian author, Najib Mahfouz. And it's a very interesting book because, like, it's obviously a play on Ibn Battuta, but he called it Ibn Fattuma. But instead of, Ibn Battuta traveled through geography, through lands, right? But Ibn Fattuma is like kind of like traveling through time in a way, where he goes through different cities and places, and he has his own personal journey as well. But the entire time he's trying to go find this place called Jebel, which is like supposed to be this like paradise land, right? And he goes through different communities and different cities, and each of those cities represents different things. So one city represents like the pagan, animalistic type of society with their cultures and values. Another one represents like where freedom is valued as the most key principle, symbolizing like democracy in Western society. Then he goes to a land called like communism, where power is, regarded as the highest. So that city it's supposed to represent communism, and so you go through each of these ways, and you start learning the positives of such societies and the negatives of such societies. And I think that was and then the book kind of ends with him about to go down to Jebel or to the city, but we don't know what happens after that. I think that was a very interesting take on a way to explain like different, not just religions and philosophical style, governmental styles. Yeah, I think that was a pretty cool book.
So now to like wrap things up before we go into the rapid fire questions. So,
Yeah.
What's one advice you would give to your younger self back in Lebanon?
I think one advice is, and I think this is something that probably a lot of people would say, and I think it's true, that we have this like vision for our life, and we know the ayah like Allah is the best of planners, but you have to go through life to properly understand that verse, because sometimes you have a plan, an outlook for your life, and some things work out, some things don't work out, and then your life starts taking these different journeys, right? But multiple times, like if my life had panned out exactly how I wanted it to pan out, it would have been a horrible, miserable life. No, genuinely, right? But Allah makes us go through these journeys and makes us go through life and has a plan for our life, and that is genuinely the best plan. And I think as I'm going through life, I'm starting to realize that more and more. Sometimes I forget it, and then someone reminds me, or I just get reflective and remind myself. But I think that is one thing that I would emphasize to young little Mohsen.
Yes. Okay. Now let's get into the rapid fire questions.
All right.
Okay. Favorite Sahaba?
Omar radiallahu anhu.
Coffee or Shay? What's this right here?
Okay. This is coffee, but I would go with Shay.
Shay.
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite snack? Do you even eat snacks?
Favorite snack? I don't know if crepes is a snack, but actually,
Yeah,
It could be. It could be.
Crepes.
Yeah. One word to describe med school during Ramadan.
Distracting.
Distracting, not word. Favorite doctor show, if you even watched any.
I've watched like a couple episodes of House,
House.
and I find them funny.
Okay. If you could rename med school, what would you name it?
Rename med school?
Yeah.
Like medical school?
Yeah. Well, would you rename it? Right now it's medical school. What would you
Yeah.
rename it to?
That's such an interesting question. It's School of Medicine.
The School of Medicine. That works too.
Wait, actually, you know what? I would name it. Yeah, never mind. Let's just go.
School of Medicine.
You have really creative answers. Okay.
What do you want me to rename medical school to?
School of Medicine. Great.
like medical school where you study.
No, I mean,
medicine?
look, it's rapid fire. I get
Okay,
it.
how about this? I'll rename it into school of
School of Life.
service school.
Service school.
Yeah,
Great. Okay.
that sucks. Okay, just keep going. Just keep going.
Well, we finished the rapid fire questions. We finished all the questions so far.
Jazakallah khair, everyone.
Jazakallah
Thank you very much for joining us for our first episode of Halal Hustle. We hope you find this interview very fun and engaging. And inshallah, be on the lookout for the next one. Inshallah.
Jazakallah
Assalamu alaikum
khairan.
Jazakallah khair,
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
guys.